Good morning. Welcome to episode 26 of the Hockey Variety Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in on this Sunday morning. It is very early. It's what, 6 in the morning right now? I was just up really early. Um yeah, the kitten, he was kind of just like sleeping like sort of adjacent to my neck last night, and then I woke up and my neck was super sore, and I was just like, "Okay, I'm just going to get up." Um, yeah, and I have the house to myself this morning, so I thought, hey, why not hop on the pod? So there we go. This probably won't be too much. This probably won't be a long episode, I would say. Not too much I want to cover. I do want to give an update on the wild card race right now, because every single NHL team actually played last night, which is the first time we saw 16 games in one night, which is kind of cool. But mathematically, that was like bound to happen eventually with 32 teams in the league. So there you go. We have like 14 or 15 games next Thursday as well. There's one more busy night. And hey, those games might actually end up mattering because the wild card race is still so close. I want to talk about some players that are having kind of quiet, really good seasons. Some of those names might not be like maybe that big of a surprise depending on which market you follow in the NHL, but I don't know. There's some players I wanted to talk about, and some guys I was a little bit surprised that they're having such good seasons. And then I want to talk about. I mentioned last episode I want to do something a bit more serious, I guess, and this is one that I've been thinking about talking about forever. But I want to talk about inclusivity in hockey, mainly like the hockey is for everyone nights and the Pride nights, and some of the pretty common criticism you see for those kind of nights that hockey teams do. And I definitely want to defend hockey is for everybody because I think it is really important, and I kind of want to give a bit of a different perspective on it. Anyways, I don't want to spoil too much of that section. Let's just get right into it. So, wild card race. All right. So in the East, I've got four teams there. I've got Florida. I got the Islanders, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo, and all of those teams won yesterday, which doesn't really change things. Certainly does not benefit the Buffalo Sabres. Even though the Sabres had a big win last night, or sorry, yesterday morning against Carolina. I was actually listening to that game while I was at the gym. Everyone was like going crazy over golf on the TV at the gym. The gym was really busy yesterday, and I'm just listening to like the Buffalo game because I was like, okay, whatever, golf. Not a big golf guy. I've played it a few times. I'm terrible. It's fun to play. It's one of those sports. It's fun to play, but I don't really get why people watch it because there's just so much like nothing happening for extended periods of time. So I guess when you're a hockey fan, when there's always stuff happening. Anyways, I'm getting off track. So wild card race, but yeah, nothing really changed. In fact, there was a point yesterday where Pittsburgh actually had the number one wild card spot, but after the Florida and the New York Islanders games concluded, they were back behind the second wild card spot. So yeah, nothing really changed. Things are, it's definitely still close. Buffalo's going to need some luck if they're going to want to get in, and they're going to have to stay red hot. I guess they're not red hot right now, but they've won two in a row. Yeah, they're going to need some luck if they want to get in. Pittsburgh's going to need a bit of luck if they want to get in. But luckily, the gap is a little bit closer for them. I know Buffalo has games in hand, but like I said last episode, they've got 4 games in 5 nights. That is brutal, right? Just really, really brutal. But hey, if they win all 4 of those games and they get a little bit of luck with those teams that they're chasing, then maybe they get in. Lyon from the Florida Panthers, the goalie, he's been red hot as well. I was thinking about picking him up in fantasy. It's tough. I've got one ad left. It needs to last me till Friday, so I'm trying to be a bit more strategic about that one. So I don't know. I might pick up Lyon. And by the way, I've stopped doing the fantasy pickups just for this last week because I'll be honest. I know one of my listeners. He's the one I'm playing in the finals. I don't really want to. Not that he needs my advice by any means, because he's definitely a lot more experienced fantasy player than I am. But Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of don't really feel like doing the fantasy picks these next few episodes. But once we get closer to next season, I'll definitely kind of do a bit of a fantasy draft preview. So, yeah, not going to be too much fantasy for a while unless you count like the playoff preview, because I will be making a bracket, but I don't really know if that counts as fantasy. So yeah, where does the East go from here though? Honestly, I don't even want to make predictions because it's like, I mean, all four of these teams have 6 wins in their last 10. They've all won at least 2 games in a row, with Florida winning 6 in a row. I mean, my gut tells me that it's Florida and the Islanders that get in. That's kind of the easy pick. Uh, so, yeah. I'm sorry, my kitten's making some sounds in the background here. But I mean, like, Pittsburgh could get in. It's a long shot for Buffalo at this point, but who knows, right? Okay, so let's look at the West. And yeah, a bit more interesting in the West last night in the sense that Nashville lost. I did actually include Nashville in this one. And I know they have a game in hand over Calgary, but so does Winnipeg, right? It's tough. It's still looking like, to me, Winnipeg's the one that gets in. But I don't know. Winnipeg has a couple slip ups, and then Calgary capitalizes. It's a totally different story. Calgary is not out of the race, but Winnipeg had a really big win against Nashville last night. They won 2-0. Connor Hellebuyck coming up big. Even though Saros played really well, for the record, they got the job done. They really needed to win that game. Or Nashville, that is. They needed to win that game, and they didn't get the job done, and that is definitely going to hurt them. Because if they won that game last night, they'd be at 90 points, just like Calgary, but with an extra game in hand, and they would be in a much better position to reach to pass Winnipeg there. So yeah, there you go. And considering they sold at the deadline, and it's tough, right? Because now Nashville, if they don't get in, they're putting themselves out of the lottery race as well. But it's just been a tough season for the Preds. I mean, this is barely missing the playoffs is definitely the position you don't want to be in, because your lottery odds suck, and then you don't make the playoffs, obviously. So that's like being just inside the playoffs at the end of the season is like the worst position. And then you have all these questions in the offseason, like if Calgary doesn't get into the playoffs, because if Calgary gets in, they could do some damage in the West. Just kind of looking at how that team is, composed. They'd probably end up playing like Vegas or Colorado or someone like that, but who knows? I mean, crazier stuff's happened. Just look at what was it, 2018? That's yeah. Anyways, or no, 2018, 2019. That was the year of all the crazy upsets, including Calgary. Calgary lost to Colorado in that first round that year. So yeah, we're just gonna have to wait and see. I have a feeling my next podcast won't be until like maybe Friday or Saturday, so I might not be able to like kind of keep up to date with this. But if you follow the Hockey Variety Podcast on Instagram, I'll keep doing little updates here and there about that, because this is definitely the big talking point in the league, considering the top 3 spots in each division are pretty much locked up. Seattle could get in there in the Pacific, but other than that, the top 3 in each division is pretty much locked up, except for like positioning. I mean, the Central's still crazy close. The Pacific's pretty close still, especially with Edmonton staying hot yesterday. I did watch a lot of that game, actually, Edmonton and San Jose. And as a Sharks fan, very happy to see the Sharks lose and help their Bedard odds a little bit more. And let's see, the Metro's still kind of up for grabs. Both the Canes and the Devils lost yesterday, so that doesn't really change things. And then the Atlantic, that is definitely locked in. Boston's ran away with it. Toronto's locked in number 2. Tampa's locked in number 3. So you can kind of already make your first round predictions. But, there might still be some injuries between now and then, so maybe don't think too much about it. But anyways, the West wildcard race, still very tight. I would say the East is a little bit more intriguing at this point, but they're both really tight. My personal prediction, I know this is like such a boring pick, but I still think Winnipeg ends up getting in. I think, Connor Hellebuyck does well under pressure. And if he's going to get at least 2 of those 3 starts, you think? He might even get all 3 of those starts. I don't know if Winnipeg has a back-to-back in there next week. But I think Winnipeg's still the one that gets in. I have a bit more faith in that roster, but it would definitely be interesting to see them fall out and see Calgary get in. It'd be really cool to see Nashville get in. But my money's still on Winnipeg. I know that's like kind of the safe pick, but yeah. Okay, let's take a look at 4 players that are having really good seasons that I think are falling under the radar because there are so many players that are having really good seasons this year. I mean, when you think about it, the Hart Trophy conversation, it's not a conversation. McDavid's winning it. The Norris, it's not really a conversation either. Carlson's going to win it. Again, he might be the first defenseman in a while to reach 100 points, so that is pretty cool. And then even like the Vezina, to me, the Vezina's been locked up for a while by Allmark, so that's not really a conversation either. So for this section, I wanted to pick a guy who is up there in goals, and I don't think it's getting talked about enough. A guy that is up there in points that isn't getting talked about enough, in my opinion, right? Again, it depends on what markets you follow. A defenseman, and then a goalie as well, who I don't think is getting talked about too much. So I want to start with Brayden Point of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So he is a goal shy of 50 at the time of recording this. He has 49 goals, 42 assists, and 91 points total. He's probably not going to hit 100 points, but he could hit 50 goals with 2 games remaining. That is considering, maybe Tampa Bay doesn't rest him between now and then, because I think he really wants to hit that 50 goal mark for the first time in his career. And this caught me off guard. I looked at all the stats before hopping on the pod, and I was like, oh, hey, Brayden Point's up there. Wow, that's crazy, And I think there's so many guys having really good seasons. I don't know if Pasternak's hit the 60 goal mark yet, but I know he's up there. Tage Thompson's up there. Obviously, McDavid's got a ton of goals. Draisaitl, he always has a ton of goals. Mikko Rantanen's up there, but I haven't heard enough about Brayden Point, and I feel like he's a guy that usually falls under the radar because Tampa has so much talent. So his previous career high in goals was 41. This was in 2018-2019, that crazy season for Tampa. Yeah, he had 41 goals, 51 assists, and then 92 points. Remember, it's very early here, so I'm stumbling my words quite a bit here, but bear with me. And that was Tampa's crazy season. Everyone had really good totals. It's actually kind of funny that like the 4 players I picked, they all had really good 2018-2019 seasons. So that ended up being the comparable. I think these are career highs. That was definitely Brayden Point's previous career high. And I'll get to Nuge and Dunn and Georgiev in a second here. But yeah, Brayden Point having a really good year considering Tampa hasn't been like crazy dominant this season like they have been in the previous ones. They've had their struggles, and Brayden Point's been, pretty consistent. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Okay, so, yeah, probably the player on this list that is getting talked about the most. But, you know what? As a former number 1 pick, he hasn't had, like, a crazy season up till this point. Now, I know he might be a bit more known for his defensive game. And he hasn't had to be that star number 1 player in recent years or that star number 1 pick in recent years, because they've got McDavid, they've got Draisaitl, and they've had guys like here and there also kind of carry the load a bit, like Evander Kane. So, really, really good season. So he's got 37 goals, 66 assists, 103 points. They've got 2 games left, so he's already hit the 100 goal mark, or 100 point mark. 100 goals. God. And he had a really good game last night against San Jose as well, kind of increasing that total. So did McDavid. I've got Draisaitl in fantasy. I was kind of hoping he would dominate a bit more, but luckily I have some other guys that are kind of carrying the load for him there. So his previous career high in points was 28 goals, 41 assists, and 69 points in 2018-2019. So a huge increase. That's a 34-point increase, I believe, from his previous career high. I actually don't know who his line mates have been all season. I don't know if he's been on like the 3rd line or something, but or he's probably jumped between that and maybe playing with McDavid and Draisaitl and then power play time. So Yeah, very happy for Nuge. He's a player I've always liked, and he's a player I've always wanted to have that big season, and he's done it. I don't know if he'll be able to repeat this next season, but I really hope he does. There's a lot of Oilers having really good offensive seasons this year. Zach Hyman being another one. Evander Kane actually hasn't been too bad in the games he's been able to play because he's missed most of the season due to an injury, that really gruesome injury early in the season. So, and this is a big reason why right now the Oilers might be my pick, even for the Stanley Cup. Honestly, like it feels crazy for me personally, like kind of leaning towards a Canadian team for once because I never pick Canadian teams in the playoffs ever. I just don't. That's just how it ends up working. And this year, it's like, man, I'm really feeling the Oilers there. I almost said the Oilanders. That'd be funny. No, I'm really feeling the Oilers this year, and they've been super hot lately. They're what now 12-0-1 or something like that in their last 13. Like they're getting hot at the right time, and then you have the ultimate game breakers in McDavid and Draisaitl, and now you have this supporting cast putting up good offensive numbers. And they're looking more steady defensively, and they've got the goaltending now with Stuart Skinner. And if Skinner were to get hurt, knock on wood, Campbell's not that bad, really. He could show up in the playoffs too. He was expected to be the starter. He's not really the starter anymore. But hey, I think he's a pretty good number 2 personally. Vince Dunn of the Seattle Kraken, he is having a good season. Another player that I think he's gotten talked about more recently, but I mean, very, very good statistics for a defenseman. So 14 goals, 50 assists for 64 points with 3 games remaining on the schedule for Seattle. Really, really good season. Hitting the 60-point mark as a defenseman is a big deal. And I think we forget that because we got guys like Adam Fox and this season, Erik Karlsson, and Cale Makar's having another good season. He's just been hurt quite a bit. So he hasn't gotten talked about too much because he's not up there in points compared to guys like Karlsson just because he missed games. But yeah, Vince Dunn, really impressive season so far. He's actually pretty young too. He was part of that 2015 draft. And his previous career high was also in 2018-2019. That was the season St. Louis won the Stanley Cup. 12 goals, 23 assists, 35 points. So we are looking at this point, 29-point increase. And you think that that's going to end up being at least a 30-point increase with 3 games remaining here for Seattle. So yeah, Vince Dunn, very impressive since coming over to Seattle. He was part of that expansion draft. People thought that Seattle was going to select Tarasenko. They ended up going with Dunn, and I feel like that ended up being the right choice. So good job on Seattle. Now, one forward I don't have on this list, I kind of want to give an honorable mention to Austin Matthews. I don't have his points in front of me, but it looks like he's going to hit the 40-goal mark again. And I remember he started slow this season, and I didn't know if he would hit 40 goals. Because to me, 40 goals, that's a good season for Austin Matthews. It's not obviously anything compared to his 60-goal season last season. But yeah, I don't know. I wanted to give Austin Matthews a shout out because he's had a pretty good season. He's not up there at the top of points again, but honestly, I think he might not be getting talked about enough. And that's partially because there's Leafs like Tavares, like Marner, like Nylander, who are all having very good offensive seasons. And then with all those big trades they made at the deadline, there's some attention being taken away from Austin Matthews, which might be a good thing going into the playoffs. I mean, he's usually the guy. He's got these really high expectations. And now he's got some of his teammates kind of taking some of that attention away from him, which I think is a very good thing for Toronto. So shout out to Austin Matthews. He's having a really good year too, in my opinion. As for a goaltender that is not getting talked about enough, in my opinion, I went with Alexander Georgiev. Now, again, this might be a guy, like, depending on the markets that you follow, he might be getting talked about more than I think. But, in this day and age, the 40 win mark for a goaltender is a big deal. Just because more and more, actually, I'd say pretty much every team at this point, they go with the tandem system. Like, you see guys like Hellebuyck and Vasilevsky who get a ton of starts, and Georgiev this season has gotten a ton of starts, though I think part of that's because Francouz is always prone to injury. He's always going to miss time, And that kind of puts a bit more pressure on Georgiev rather than turning to whoever Colorado's number 3 is right now. So Georgiev got a ton of starts, and he's been great. This has been, without a doubt, his best season so far. So 38 wins. So he's 2 away from the 40 win mark. That's important. 38 wins, 16 losses, and 5 overtime or shootout losses. He's got a 919. And when you look at the leaders in save percentage this season and kind of compare him to some of the other guys, in this day and age, with scoring going up, a 919 is a very good save percentage, in my opinion. Now, Colorado has 4 games remaining. However, he's not starting tonight. Francouz is starting in today's game. I can't remember who Colorado's playing. So pretty much Georgiev will have 3 shots at the 40 win mark. I don't know if he's going to get all 3 of those start, but you think he's going to get at least 2. So he has a couple cracks at hitting the 40 win mark for the first time in his career. And if you look at his previous career stats, he's absolutely destroying his career totals, at least in terms of wins. So in terms of save percentage, I think this was his best save percentage, but either way, I wanted to go with 2018, 2019 again. This was at the Rangers, and he obviously wasn't starting, but he was 14, 13, 4 in 2018, 2019, and he had a 914. So a pretty good season. But when you look at last season with New York, again, Shesterkin was getting most of the starts. Obviously, he won the Vezina. But Georgiev, in 21-22, he had 15 wins, 10 losses, and 2 overtime or shootout losses. But he had an 898, so he was just below a 900 save percentage. And Colorado showed some confidence. In the offseason, they couldn't really afford Darcy Kuemper, so they wanted to make a change. They knew Georgiev would be a bit more affordable, and they were really banking on him having a bounce back, at least in terms of save percentage. And he has. So really good pro scouting by the Colorado Avalanche organization, because they hit a home run with Georgiev. They needed to address that goaltending position if they wanted any chance at repeating. They put themselves in a good position to even win the Central this season, which is great. And yeah, they hit a home run with Georgiev. That's awesome. Like a 919. He's played 60 some games or high 50s. I don't know. I don't feel like adding it up, but he could hit the 40 win mark, and that is a big deal in this day and age. It's not very common to see goalies hit the 40 win mark. Like look at Ullmark. Ullmark's having a phenomenal season, and he's like just shy of the 40 win mark right now. And you know, when you look at like 10, 20 years ago, you had guys like Brodeur, you had guys like Luongo just like casually hitting the 40 win mark. Braden Holtby, another one. Like there's tons of goalies you can point out because they got more starts back then. And because they have that tandem, most teams go with a tandem these days. You don't see goalies reach that 40 win mark anymore because, you know, guys like Hellebuyck and Vasilevsky, that's a bit more rare these days. You see teams going closer to 50-50. And that's probably a big reason why Ullmark hasn't hit the 40 win mark, is because they turned to Jeremy Swayman to pick up some of those starts as well. It's not quite 50-50 in Boston, but it's pretty close to 50-50. And Jeremy Swayman's been great. So, I mean, Boston, they have 2 really good options going into the playoffs. They got Swayman, they got Ullmark. That is definitely a luxury, having 2 guys that could take their team on a run, really. So if one of them gets hurt, you got some insurance there too. So yeah, big shout out to Alexander Georgiev. He's having a great season. I'm very happy for him. And I did not have a ton of confidence in him going into this season either. I knew this would be a risk for Colorado, and this was a very good pickup for them in the offseason. Okay, last thing I want to talk about. I want to talk about the Hockey Is For Everyone initiative. I don't know what you want to call it, but I'm pretty much talking about Pride Nights that every NHL team is doing now. But a lot of the stuff I cover can also really be applied to things, some of the things that some teams do, like, doing stuff for Black History Month, like Latino Culture Night, or, whatever. Like, they pretty much do kind of everything now to promote inclusivity and really highlight some players and some accomplishments that we've seen in the NHL for like racial and ethnic minorities, and then more recently, members of the LGBTQ community, which is what I'm going to be focusing on in this video. So those of you that followed the podcast for a while, you know that I'm very pro inclusivity. You know, I'm very much an ally for, or I take pride in being an ally for the LGBTQ community. Totally sound like Trump there, don't I? Remember how Trump would always be like, I am the most inclusive. Nobody is more inclusive than me. All of my friends say I'm inclusive. I totally sound like that. But I am big on inclusivity in hockey. And I want to address, so like, first of all, like, just don't look at the comment section of anything related to Pride Night, because it's just makes you lose faith in humanity. But hear me out, because I think there is reason to be optimistic about where things are going, especially if you are someone who really likes NHL doing these. So when you look at the comment sections of any of these posts, which you shouldn't, but I mean, I get curious, it's always the same. It's always the same. I don't know if it's always the same people, but it's always the same kind of comments every single time. It's almost like they're waiting for NHL teams to make a post about Pride Night so they can just jump all over it. And same thing with a lot of like the ethnic and racial minority posts that NHL teams will make. So I want to address the real common ones I see and why I think they're flat out wrong to start with. And then the last one's the big one that I want to talk about too, because I think out of all of these points that people try to make, that's the one that may have a little bit of weight to it, but I'm going to address why that one's a little bit more complicated than others. So again, this is probably a bit more, I don't want to say controversial, but this might be a bit more of like, I try to kind of not really stay away from these kind of topics, but I think it's important to talk about because I think it's a problem. And I think it's a problem in the sense that there's so much hate on these posts in the comment section. Like, it's really, really sad to me. And I do want to make a strong argument against a lot of these comments because I don't really, I try to stay in the middle with a lot of these kind of more controversial things, but this is a tough one for me. I can't really see the other side and hear me out. So the first point I want to talk about, and this is kind of the most common comment I see, is just stick to hockey. And okay, so I'm going to go and take this literally. So I know that the people that post these comments, and by the way, I think a lot of these comments get a ton of upvotes because of what I call hate bots. Okay, I can guarantee on platforms like Instagram, there are bots and burner accounts that just upvote these kind of comments so that they end up at the top. And you might be thinking, why don't the NHL and NHL teams just turn off comments on these posts? Because I've noticed that's a really bad look too. I follow CBC on Facebook, like tons of Canadians do. Actually, I don't follow them anymore, but during like the peak of COVID, I did. And I noticed when, there was a lot of information going out about like vaccines and masks and stuff that at the time a lot of people were against, and people still are. They turned off comments. And I think in that moment, that was kind of a good thing because it's like, hey, listen, this is legit information. This is backed by science. Stop trying to pretend that it's not in the comment sections. But they still have the comments off. And I've noticed with some CBC posts, it's like there really needs to be some dialogue on this from just from like the general population. The big thing for me was the really, really mean article they posted about Alexander Ovechkin right after his father passed away. Something I kind of wanted to talk about in the podcast, but I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole. But anyways, I don't know if it's a good look for the NHL to turn off comments on these, but I'm sure it's something they're thinking about. But anyways, just stick to hockey is one thing a lot of people say. Or some person will say, and then the bots will upvote it like crazy. And it looks like it's probably more of a popular opinion than it is. But who knows, right? Maybe I'm just kind of in some denial and I want to think the world's more inclusive than it actually is. I don't know. But let's take this literally, because I know the people that post this, they're probably thinking, they probably have their own kind of agenda where it's like, okay, just stick to hockey instead of Pride Night, instead of Black History Month awareness, instead of like Latino culture appreciation, just stick to hockey, right? But no, let's take this literally. Okay, let's say the NHL only literally stick to hockey. Okay, so you don't see any of these inclusivity nights or anything that remotely promotes inclusivity. And hey, let's take it a step further. Let's say there's no more hockey fights cancer. Let's say there's no more let's just say community events as a whole. Okay, no more 50-50, no more bringing awareness to anything. Just stick to hockey. Let's say that is the world we live in. Okay, first of all, our game would be so boring if they didn't have stuff like this. It would be, if the only thing with a hockey game was you go to the rink and watch the game, or you turn on the TV and you watch the game, and they don't highlight any good stories, they don't highlight anything that isn't like remotely related to hockey, it would be really boring. I think that's kind of what it comes down to. Like it's part of building the game. It's part of spreading the game and reaching new honestly, like just new demographics of people, and I think that's important. The world is becoming more inclusive, and that's a good thing. You know, it's not like there's tons of people out there who support the LGBTQ community, and I think that's a very good thing. And you're reaching those people as well. Like, you're reaching the allies. It's not just spreading the game to members of the LGBTQ community. It's spreading the game to people that also want to promote inclusivity. You know, it's a good look for the league to go more than just sticking to hockey. And I'm going to talk about that a bit more in the last point I have there as well. It would also get rid of a lot of jobs in the NHL. Like, every NHL team and the NHL itself have a very, very big, like HR department. I don't know if that's the right word, but they all have a big team that is all about promoting the game locally, promoting the game on a bigger scale, and inclusivity is a big part of that too. So you'd be getting rid of a lot of jobs, which is a bad thing as well. Honestly, like, I think it's good for the NHL to have a lot of people working for these organizations, and because I think that's part of growing the game as well. So just stick to hockey, I think, is a bad argument, because I think what it comes down to is the game would be very, very boring if we didn't have these kind of nights, right? And I get that it can be overwhelming, especially when all 32 teams are doing it. That's, again, another point I'm going to get to at the last point there. But yeah, I think just stick to hockey. I don't think that's good for the game at all. Should hockey be the main focus? Of course, it's hockey, right? But I think there is definitely room to have things like Pride Night, like hockey fights cancer. You know, like these are good stories in my opinion. So, okay, the second point. I hate it when sports get political, okay? Now, I don't think promoting inclusivity is political, okay? And the reason why is here. Okay, I got my phone open here. I've got the literal definition of the word political from the Oxford Dictionary, okay? So this is about as legit as it can get, okay? Relating to the government or the public affairs of a country, okay? And then I want to read the second definition, because this is important. Relating to the ideas or strategies of a particular party or group in politics, okay? So I think most people will agree that the idea of promoting inclusivity is kind of, I think people associate that more with like liberal politics. So like the Liberal Party here in Canada, the NDP party in Canada, which kind of sways a bit more liberal. Not that I have any American viewers American listeners that wonder, but hey, if you're an American listener, let me know in the comments, because I like knowing that maybe this podcast is going beyond just like a few people I know. And then in the States, something that probably aligns a bit more with the Democratic Party, but hear me out, okay? Like, let's say at the next election, okay, like the conservative government wins and the Republican wins. I don't think that conversation about inclusivity is going to stop. I don't even think it's going to slow down, even because I think we've reached a point where a lot of people on whatever political party you follow wants to promote inclusivity, not just in hockey, but really in kind of all aspects of life. So I don't think this is a political thing. Like, is promoting inclusivity in hockey gonna really sway someone one way when they vote? And for the record, like, I have no idea who I'm gonna vote for. It's something I don't think about. So please don't think that this is coming from a place of me trying to push a certain own personal agenda, because I literally try to make a conscious effort to think about who I'm going to vote for 2 days before an election, because I know how small my impact is as as a person, really, especially since I live somewhere that usually votes a certain way every single time. I feel like my vote doesn't have a ton of impact, but I still think it's important to go out and vote, so I'm going to. But I really try not to think too much about politics because I know my influence is so small, and there's more important things in life that I do have an impact on, like my job, like my family, like my friends, like following hockey on this podcast. So, who knows? Maybe this will be a political podcast, and maybe I'll be the next what's his name, Steven Crowder, whatever that guy's name is, but or Alex Jones. No, but can you imagine if this podcast just took like a big literal right turn? No. Anyways, where was I going? Okay, I hate when hockey gets political. So I don't think promoting inclusivity is a political thing at all, because like this is just how the world's going, right? And when you look at history, like people who don't really support the LGBTQ community at all, like it or not, I think you're going to end up on the wrong side of history eventually, right? And this is like the big takeaway out of this section is if you genuinely like express hate for any group of people, I really think that you should maybe consider seeking some help, because that is not a good thing to think, especially when it's a group of people that has maybe no impact on your life. And, it's not like any of this is a choice either. Like, is this really something to be hateful about? I mean, if you hate, like, people that cut you off in traffic, like that, okay, like, I get that, right? But when it's like a group of people like this, if you really have feelings of hate like that, I would consider, maybe seeking some counseling and really try to work through some of those thoughts, because it's not good. It's not healthy, in my opinion, at all, just having any kind of hate for a group of people. And there's no shame in going to counseling and, talking things out as well. Like, there might be some deeper issues, maybe something to do with like your upbringing. I think that's kind of like the big factor when it comes to people feeling kind of hate towards a group of people for some reason. There's no shame in going seeking some help and working through some stuff, because that's not a healthy way to think just as a whole. That's the big thing I want people to take away from this section of the podcast. But no, I don't think this is political. I know people will associate this with woke culture. And this segues really nicely into the last point I want to talk about, which is, these big organizations, they just want to be woke for your money, right? So the idea is that these NHL teams are promoting inclusivity to come across as being more woke and to essentially promote their business and being like, hey, we care about these things, so you should give us your money because we care about these and we're the good guys and this and that. And out of these 3 points, I don't want to say this is the strongest point, but I think this is the point that has a little bit more to talk about, a little bit more that I don't want to see. I kind of see where people are coming from, but hear me out, because I've done a lot of thinking about this particular point. So, first of all, think of it this way, okay? So, when you say things like, not just that, but any of the points I've said, let's say there's an NHL team that, they listen to these comments and they now don't want to do Pride Night anymore. Okay, I'm not going to like pick a team, but let's say one NHL team decides to stop doing Pride Night, okay? You are now that team that doesn't support the LGBTQ community. At least, like, that's how people will interpret it. You are that one team. From a business standpoint, that's an awful look, right? Because now you are that team. You are the team that doesn't care about this, at least in the public eye. That's how people see it. So, if you make comments like the organizations are just doing this for money, it's like, okay, are you saying that they should be the only team that doesn't do this? Because that's a terrible, terrible look. Even if like none of the higher ups really want to support this in a particular organization, it's still a bad look. And that goes beyond hockey. That can be applied to any business, right? Okay, let's take like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, okay? First of all, soda's terrible for you. You shouldn't drink either, but those are just the two companies that come to mind, right? Let's say Coca-Cola makes a conscious effort to promote inclusivity. It's in their ads. Even if it's not entirely genuine, that's what they do. And let's say Pepsi doesn't do that, okay? So Coca-Cola has now reached a new demographic of people that want to show support for the LGBTQ community. And they might be swayed a bit more to choose Coca-Cola for that reason, because it's like, okay, I'd rather support that company than, Pepsi. It's not a good look for Pepsi, right? And I think that's why we see so much kind of like inclusivity promoted by larger companies, is because you don't want to be that company that doesn't, okay? So, and that's why I think this point might have a bit of weight, but the problem is, if an organization chooses not to promote inclusivity because some guy commented, then you're now labeled as that company, right? It will get out. People will notice, like, hey, this company isn't down with whatever, right? And I get that in this day and age, it might feel a bit overwhelming because it's new, right? Like, this conversation about inclusivity, it's a fairly new thing, and people fear change. People don't like change, and that's kind of what it comes down to. But also, like, you're really going to end up on the wrong side of history, I think, when it's all said and done, right? And I'm not saying you have to go into the comment sections and be like, I love this so much, this is such a great thing, but you don't need to promote the hate, because it's gonna end up aging really bad, in 10, 20 years, hopefully sooner. When you leave those kind of comments, it's gonna look extra bad, because it's gonna look like straight up hate speech. I'm gonna call it right now. And you're seeing this less and less with racial and ethnic posts related to like racial and ethnic minorities, which is a great thing that you're seeing this less and less. But we need to kind of hold that same standard, I think, for posts related to Pride Night, related to promoting the LGBTQ community. So just in regards to that last point, like, I don't know what the motives are of any organization, really. I like to think that these are genuine, that these companies genuinely support the LGBTQ community, and it's not all about money. But I'm also not in those board offices. I don't know anything about this because I don't have that kind of insider information, obviously. So I don't truly know the motives of these organizations. And I really want to believe that it comes from a genuine place of inclusivity. Though that's probably not the case. There probably is a money side of things here too, trying to, show people that, hey, we claim to promote this, so you will give us your business. So I think that's kind of why that last point might have a little bit of weight, but at the same time, it is not in the best interest of any organization to not promote inclusivity, because one, it's the right thing to do, and two, it's not good for business, and that is important as well. And again, I get that a lot of this is new to some people, and that might be why it's kind of scary. But again, I feel like if you don't really support this, then you're gonna, or at least like, if you show hatred towards this, I think you're really gonna end up on the wrong side of history, and that's not a hill to die on. Really, life's too short. Okay, so long story short, I think Hockeys for Everyone is a very good thing, and I hope the league continues to do this. I hope they continue to really make a strong effort to promote inclusivity in the game, not just related to the LGBTQ community, which I have messed up that acronym so many times in this podcast today because it's early. Just stumbling my words like crazy. But also when it comes to like not even just racial and ethnic minorities, but really any group of people that they feel needs a bit more recognition. So if you feel kind of feelings of hatred like this, if you see an NHL team make a post about like Ramadan or about some kind of inclusivity event that they're doing in their organization, you don't need to leave a hate comment. If it's something that bothers you, again, it might be worth maybe seeking some help and working through those feelings, because I don't think it's a good way to think. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too much of a hot take. Hopefully that wasn't like too controversial of a thing to talk about. I was really hesitant about this, but I want to come from a place of like compassion. I really want to show support for these communities, and I think this is something that needs to get talked about, because I do think that these kind of hate comments on posts, I think it's a bad thing, really, especially since they end up kind of being some of the top comments. Maybe it's from these hate bots. Maybe it's from people genuinely coming from a place of hatred, which is a scary thought. But honestly, like, considering how, I mean, the world is a messed up place too. I mean, like, was it a week or two ago, some father got like stabbed because he told a guy to stop vaping in a coffee shop or something like that, like, where he asked a guy to stop vaping. Like, it's just like the world's so messed up that these kind of hate comments don't surprise me, but I really hope we see way less of them as time goes on. Really, it's not good, and I think on a personal level it makes you look bad. So okay, I'm done. I'm glad I got all that out. Thanks for bearing with me on that. I probably sound like a SJW cuck sheep woke guy or whatever. So I'm just gonna wrap up that section now. And that is it for this episode of the podcast. It actually ended up going a bit longer than I expected, which is nice. I need to get my day started here. I got a lot to do, but thank you so much for listening on this Sunday morning. My next episode will probably be my playoff bracket, and it will probably be next weekend. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited for that episode. And get ready to leave me some hate comments of your own when I pick the Oilers to win the Stanley Cup. Oh man, I can't believe I'm saying that. But hey, I don't know. They honestly, I think they're my pick right now. It's yeah. So joking aside though, please don't leave me a hate comment. But hey, if you disagree with me that the Oilers actually have a chance, let me know. I would love to have that conversation. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a like. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube if you have not already. I do have a Facebook page, but I haven't really been too active for it because, I don't know, I'm kind of iffy about Facebook these days. And yeah, but I do have a Facebook page, so feel free to follow that. I'm very active on the Hockey Variety Podcast Instagram page. So if you look hard enough for that, you should be able to find the podcast. Please leave me a follow on Instagram. In fact, I'm going to tell you the tag of the Instagram page right now. It's just straight up Hockey Variety Podcast, all one word on Instagram. Please leave me a follow there. I'm very active on Instagram. I share a lot of stuff. I leave some of my hot takes. So if you do want to kind of get a little extra dose of the podcast, be sure to follow me on Instagram. And thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you, or thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you next weekend.